Charlotte Delbo, a member of the French resistance and survivor of Auschwitz, and Gad Beck, a gay German man in a Christian and Jewish mixed family who made it through the war as part of an underground resistance, provide very different perspectives. Delbo, in her memoirs, offers a grim, sensitive depiction of unthinkably intense experiences. Beck, on the other hand, employs humor that allows him to slip in insights on family and resistance. However different their writing styles and lives, Delbo and Beck's texts both independently suggest and agree on certain issues of supporting people who face and have faced persecution. Neither depict help as entirely easy or approachable. Often, simply caring about a person isn't enough. And society as a whole frequently neglects personal, practical help in the aftermath of atrocities. Beck, for instance, often describes his Christian relatives as determinedly following a family motto of "don't let the Jews down," but he also is very conscious of the performativity and hypocrisy that were far more common. After the war, an unbelievable number of Christians told me they secretly helped the Jews. If you could count on these statistics, millions of Jews would have been saved. It was really more their way of saving their own souls. Many had their exceptional good Jew, a good and pitiable person whom they treated nicely to make it all the more easy to close their eyes to the mass crimes going on against humanity. I don't think anyone was really thinking about afterwards at that time. But only in very few cases did this niceness, definitely better than hostility, which was more frequent, turn into real aid. Beck emphasizes throughout his memoir the frequency with which people he knew were willing to help him, but that defiance rarely extended to direct opposition against the Nazis, due to both the normalization of Nazism in Germany and the danger of that kind of action. In the years that followed, nonetheless, small acts of aid and resistance were transformed from regular human decency to big choices that proved a person's morality. What felt inconsequential at the time suddenly was faked for the sake of a person's self-image. Simply being kind towards a friend was exaggerated afterwards into a big show of allyship to eliminate the guilt of being a bystander. Beck expresses exhaustion at these ethical competitions, which only create an ineffectual fuss that ignores people actively struggling in the aftermath of the Holocaust. Charlotte Delbo comparably draws a line between the interest of camp survivors to recover versus the interest of society to return back to normalcy. From the point of view of one of her comrades, Maddo, Delbo writes, "Would she have returned in order to do boring office work, race in the morning to catch her bus? Munette, who used to say, 'If we return, nothing will be the same'? Everything is the same. It is within us that nothing is the same. I am well aware of what is not the same within me, what is unlike what I was before, and thus makes me different from the others. The mountain of corpses between them and me. Munette did not die so that you and I, and perhaps a few others, might preserve her idealized image. Although society returns to a mundane routine as it always has, Delbo and the others are unable to completely fit back into the roles they previously inhabited. The inexpressible change within them alienates them from a world that unfeelingly carries on. Ordinary expectations of grieving sicken Maddo, as Munette's death was in a place she and the others never truly believed they would escape from. Munette's hope, which once provided the group some assurance, has become a persistent reminder of society's ignorance. Everything remains the same. Munette's words change nothing. Munette, meanwhile, has been altered into an innocent, faceless victim of the camps, rather than a real, angry person. Her memory will always be misinterpreted and distorted, in a misguided attempt at treating her with respect. And the gap between Maddo and the oblivious rest of the world is too vast and exhausting for her to even explain everything wrong with the way she is treated and people like Munette are remembered. Beck experiences a similar discomfort as he describes Kristallnacht. "I couldn't join the chorus of voices saying that they had seen burning synagogues all over. If all the Jews who say that today had really been standing there watching, then all of German Jewry would have been out there on the streets that night. I'm sure that whoever happened to be outside ran home as fast as possible as soon as the glass started shattering." And year after year, I observe how the 9th of November is commemorated in Germany, with mayors and dignitaries. They all stand around with dead serious expressions, hanging their heads to the side and looking so sad you'd think they had lost something. Every year the same words, no matter which party the speakers are from, and all I can do is smell the shit and hear the crude comment of the apprentice. Beck refuses to feign a useless pretense of respect. He straightforwardly admits his disconnect from Kristallnacht without trying to inflate his own importance. Instead of genuinely helping victims of persecution, solemn speeches and memorials often serve as an easy means of making politicians and officials look good. Claiming understanding and interest is simple and appealing to the public, while actual action is much more complicated and messy to even set out to accomplish. With a bit of humor, Beck seems to wonder whom the shallow speeches are even addressed to. Certainly not himself, as he wasn't even there, nor plenty of other Jews, as they would have hidden themselves away and only dealt with the damages afterwards. Nonetheless, big, showy displays of allyship that ultimately accomplish nothing are common, and partially understandable, as people as a collective take comfort in finding meaning from meaninglessness, taking something senseless like Kristallnacht and generalizing it into a large, vague thing that people can feel good about remembering to honor, allows them to address it to some extent, though it means overlooking individual people who are still reeling from the personal and familial effects of persecution. After all, providing direct, meaningful aid can be extremely hard. In her chapter titled Mary Louise, Delbo offers an off-puttingly happy recovery story after the relentless difficulty of the convoy's other narratives. Mary Louise assures Delbo that her husband Pierre has resolved her overwhelming fear and inability to function, saying that Pierre is informed about everything. He remembers better than I do. You can speak to him about any of the women in the convoy, he'd know better who she was. Even as Pierre has helped Mary Louise, having patience with her and gradually guiding her into more and more independence, he and his wife have convinced themselves that his involvement has erased her trauma, despite the fact that she still wakes up early as if she is roll call. Pierre spends most of the chapter speaking for her, jumping into the conversation constantly to inform Delbo and Mary Louise that he knows exactly whom they're talking about and feels as if he's been at the camp with them. The passage is also unique in that it takes the perspective of Delbo describing Mary Louise rather than actually taking Mary Louise's point of view in first person. And the account itself is one of the fictionalized ones based off of more than one person rather than a particular real individual. Delbo herself does not address her intent behind including the chapter, as Delbo is not the kind of writer to ever spell her intent out for the reader. However, the fictional elements of the scene and its bewildering tone and perspective shift indicate that it's uncomfortable on purpose. Sandwiching a peaceful happy ending between constant dread, numbness, and anguish feels extremely purposeful, just as Beck is bothered by the romanticized, over-dramatized treatment of Kristallnacht. Delbo includes a cute, perfect version of dealing with PTSD that appears false beside the other narratives. People may feel comforted by stories like Mary Louise's, as it's appealing to think that loving someone enough and enveloping them will fix their trauma. But Delbo's recontextualization of these narratives turns them disorienting and slightly horrifying. After all, Delbo and the reader never see Mary Louise's thoughts. There's no way to know how haunted Mary Louise still is. Likewise, social pressures towards women restrict their ability to take time to process. One woman, Louise, says that after 20 years of marriage, there's only one deportee in this couple. He's the deportee. He was deported, and so he gets tired immediately. He was deported, and so he can't stay up. He goes to bed right after dinner. He was deported, so he's frail, sick, nervous, sensitive to cold. As a woman, Louise is thrust back into her societal expectation to act as a caretaker, despite her PTSD and exhaustion. While her husband is allowed to be supported and prioritized as weak and sickly, Louise's trauma is minimized at the expense of her mental health. Being able to provide for a husband or children is unfortunately equated to moving on, as though progressing through life means also progressing through post-traumatic stress. Beck, meanwhile, as a man, does not face the same blatant erasure as Delbo and her peers, and his circumstances are considerably different than people who ended up in camps. However, as a gay man, his perspective is also overlooked. Beck's writing style minimizes his suffering, and Delbo centers hers. Both reach similar cynical conclusions about society's short-sightedness towards what helps victims. Furthermore, both indicate that earnest ethical behavior is possible. Beck describes a scene of protest as full of enraged, empowered families. I always try to remember what it was like as they stood there in the middle of the city shouting, "Give us back our children, give us back our husbands and wives." Many of them had been totally apolitical citizens up to then. In the passage, Beck focuses specifically on the fact that most of the protesters had never considered themselves political before that moment. Their decision to stand up against the Nazi Party itself was personal and purposeful. Anyone can try to make an impact if they show commitment to those closest to them. On the other hand, Delbo insists that some distance is also needed, especially in the aftermath. Pierre crosses a boundary by claiming Mary Louise's experiences as his own. But another husband, Maurice, carefully keeps out of the room when his wife's companions from Auschwitz visit. Even as he addresses them politely, he maintains a careful line between his life and his spouse's, understanding that he will never understand and can still love her without fully understanding. At the end of the chapter, he says that he was glad to have met his wife's comrades. Not his own, but his wife's. In the case of Delbo, support requires a balance, both being understanding that trauma is not something that's fixable, and being willing to do small, practical things to make life easier. And in the case of both Delbo and Beck, society as a whole obscures the needs of victims under social norms and useless debates over who has helped the most. The first step to having an ethical response to atrocities is paying attention to people who have suffered and giving them the time and patience they need.